Hey everyone, welcome back to Secrets of Social Impact Communicators. I'm Nate Burt. So happy to have you here. Today on the show, I am thrilled to have Jacque Matsen, owner and founder of Relate Strategies LLC. We're going to talk about a wide range of things. This episode, I think, will be especially valuable if you work as a communicator, if you've ever collaborated with consultants or hired communication consultants. You're going to learn a lot of insights around how to do that effectively, how to have a great working relationship, and get the most value out of that investment. So without further ado, let's dive into my conversation with Jacque. I think you're going to learn so much from Jacque's expertise and wisdom practicing what she preaches. Well, welcome back to Secrets of Social Impact Communicators. And today I'm so delighted to have with me Jacque Matsen, owner and founder of Relate Strategies LLC. Jacque, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to be on. I'm honored.
Hey, it's my pleasure and have loved working with you over the years, Jacque. I wondered if you could start off telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Relate Strategies.
For sure. I've spent about 20 years in agricultural communications, reputation management, economic development, as you know, but it kind of all has boiled down to finding a way to bridge the gap between the organization I'm working for and its stakeholders and the external audiences it's trying to connect with and reach. I've worked for brands like Beef It's What's for Dinner, Pioneer, and the National Pork Board. And now basically at Relate Strategies, I do that same work, but just for clients. I started up my consulting business earlier this year and have been excited to be doing the same sort of work for this similar sort of clients, but just all at the same time.
I love that, Jacque. Thank you so much for sharing that great background. And when you're working in agriculture like you and I have for many years, I feel like it's very purpose-driven work, right? You're connecting with farmers and ranchers. You're connecting to our food, which is sort of integral to every human being's life. When did you first know you wanted to pursue purpose-driven work, and what excites you about what you get to do every day?
I love this question because it takes me back to when I was first starting out my career in communication. And, ironically, even though I grew up in and around agriculture in Iowa, I had no idea that I really wanted to work for agriculture. And I guess I didn't even think about it as a separate industry because I grew up in it.
Sure.
And suddenly I found myself working for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And I realized that the most important thing for me, the thing that kept me going when we were responding to issues or crises, was knowing that the work we were doing, the work I was doing, was helping farmers and ranchers have a voice and hopefully continue to operate because they were building their reputation with their external audiences. I kind of felt like I had this unique opportunity to be the PR agency for beef producers. And that was such an honor and just filled my cup in a way that a title or salary just don't. And so I think I realized it a really long time ago without really recognizing that that's what I was feeling.
I love that answer, Jacque, and it speaks to just the tremendous value, whether, there are listeners in the audience who are in agriculture and in other industries outside of it, but just the merits or the value of the work itself and getting to represent those underrepresented voices or, folks who don't have a platform otherwise, I think is so powerful. So I love that answer. As a seasoned communications executive yourself, you've worked with and led many consultants. What do the best communications consultants have in common?
I think it's that they've been in your shoes. Fundamentally, it's easy to say a lot of the work is the same. At the end of the day, we're identifying target audiences. We're coming up with strategies to accomplish our goals, and we're measuring and adjusting. But it's just different when, as you know, when you're inside an organization and you have these variety of stakeholders, whether it's other colleagues or it's a board of directors. In some cases, it's state or regional affiliates. And there's just different pressures and different expectations and an additional set of audiences you have to think about when you're internal to an organization. So I truly think the best consultants either have been in those shoes and understand those unique pressures and demands, or they have gone to considerable effort to understand where you're coming from. And they come to the table recognizing that they don't have a full understanding and all the answers, and they're asking for that guidance and advice from you as the client.
You raise several really interesting points, Jackie. One of them being just empathy and appreciation for what your clients are going through, right? And also a recognition to be humble enough to ask questions and to get inside the mindset or the needs or the challenges that an organization might be facing. I love that answer. As you are looking, let's put ourselves in the shoes of an organization that's looking to hire a consultant. You can go on LinkedIn or work through your human resources department to try to find a communications consultant that's a good fit. Given the fact that you've sat on both sides of the table, how do you advise organizations to align all of the possible consultants they could work with the one or the handful who might be the best organizational fit?
Yeah, well, perhaps not surprisingly, I'm going to suggest that you start internally with a clear vision of what you're looking for.
Sure.
I think it's easy for an organization to say, well, we need to communicate, and perhaps we even have a targeted budget and a campaign in mind that we want to do, and then to go out and try to solicit help to do that. But that actually misses several steps. First of all, what kind of expertise are you looking for? Do you need industry expertise, or can you provide that within your organization, or might you source that elsewhere? Or do you need expertise around the type of work specifically that needs to be done? So folks like you and I who specialize in the social responsibility space, or your work that's so specific to helping people put together grant strategies, what kind of advice do you need? And then at what level do you need that advice? So I mentioned grant strategy in your case, but maybe you just need arms and legs. Maybe you just can't get the approval to hire additional staff to implement the project. So I see so many folks who start with, well, we need a consultant to help us with X, and take it to the several next steps of, well, what about X do you need help with, and at what level?
Yeah, that's excellent, Jackie. And I think you're right. Strategy and just some of that internal reflection before going out and finding someone is just going to put you light years ahead as an organization, as a team, because it's going to give you that clarity of vision. It's going to help ensure that you're finding the right fit and bringing someone into your organization to help you in a consulting capacity in a way that lets both of you work faster, more efficiently, more collaboratively with clearer communication. So yeah, I couldn't agree more that some of those questions, that self-reflection is precisely the place to start. Another thing I see, and you may have seen this as well, Jackie, in your career, is that I have an organization, I bring a consultant on board, and then I'm sort of putting them, maybe not on a shelf, but I get busy. I've got a lot going on as an executive who hired the consultant. And so I don't leverage them as well as I could have. I don't get the value that I wanted to necessarily. So what tips or tricks can you give organizations that work with consultants on a regular basis to really get the most value once they have a consultant on board?
Yeah, 100%. It's often, I think we underestimate the amount of time that it takes to bring in somebody external. Absolutely. Bringing in somebody external helps you gain bandwidth. It helps you add expertise that you may not otherwise have on your team, but it takes intentionality and it takes time. And so I think sometimes we falsely talk ourselves into believing that adding that external resource allows us to significantly expand our scope and what we can work on. But I think we have to be honest with ourselves before we ever even employ the external resource with whether we have the time and ability to leverage and take advantage of what that external resource has to offer. The other thing that I think is key is integrating that consultant. So to your point about sitting on a shelf, I think it's way easier for that to happen when that consultant isn't invited into regularly occurring team meetings. There's a lot of digital ways to make integration happen by making them a guest on your team's environment, for example. Maybe you give them a organizational email that they can use that helps them with outreach to your constituents and stakeholders and helps them schedule meetings with people internally. So I think making sure you have the time and ability to give the work the focus it deserves. If it's worth doing and it's worth hiring somebody to help you do, make sure you have the time to really take advantage of the work the consultant's doing. And then, do whatever you can to integrate the consultant into the team, the organization, and the work so that they don't feel like they're a totally separate arm that you get to forget about for a period of time while they're off doing work, but rather they're part of the team doing the work.
I think that's really beautifully said, Jackie. And I love the fact that you sort of highlighted scope and really recognizing that you may not be able to add a lot of extra work, but really getting focused and targeted on a specific project or function of the organization where you need a consultant support. I also love what you had to say about integration, not only in the email front or team meetings, but also tools like Teams and Slack, and just finding ways to make a consultant to, again, leverage the investment that you're already making. I think that's the biggest thing for leaders to keep in mind is that, you're committing resources that could easily go somewhere else. So really tapping into that, and something just to riff off of what you're saying, I've seen to be really effective, especially for larger organizations, perhaps with an existing full-time communications function, is to delegate some of that relationship management to someone on your team who can coordinate with the consultant and really find ways to really tap into that value, even if you as a busy executive don't have that time. So again, it may not be you who's doing everything, and nor should it be necessarily, but finding someone and really tapping into that power and that added capacity, outside expertise can be a real game changer and a support function for your organization. So I love those insights.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nate. And adding on to that,
please.
I think that gives that staff person you've identified an opportunity at leadership. Maybe that person isn't to the point yet, or your organization can't support allowing that person to have a direct report, but serving as the point of contact on a project like that with an external consultant is a great way to give that person experience with providing feedback, making expectations clear, regularly touching base with the consultant to get a temperature check. So a lot of those same skills that you need to develop as a new people leader can be practiced by leading a project with an external consultant. So as executives, we need to shift our mindset away from thinking like that's an added burden onto somebody, but rather it's an opportunity for them to learn.
Yeah, well said, Jackie. And I think you're exactly right. It's a tremendous opportunity for leadership. And I think it does require an extra layer for a team member who either isn't actively managing a big team day to day or someone who's looking to grow into more leadership opportunities. It's not the same as working with someone internal to your organization who maybe you can easily pick up the phone or connect with via email. Certainly, professional consultants are going to be as available as they can be, but nonetheless, it requires, again, cultivation of those leadership capabilities and clear communication, which can be a real benefit not only for your team or your organization, but for that leader who's looking for new opportunities to contribute. I love that insight. What would you say about, and we may have mentioned some of these already, Jackie, but what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes I can make as a leader when I'm working with a communications consultant, and how can I avoid those kinds of mistakes?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's just the inverse of what we were talking about. It's things like not taking the time to assess what you really need and then ending up with a wrong fit. And that's really unfortunate. If you haven't been honest about what you really need from your consultant, and then you hire them based on a misaligned set of expectations, we all know things can go very badly in that case.
Right.
You mentioned it in one of the questions you asked earlier, which is radio silence. It's terrible to have somebody who you're paying who isn't hearing back from you, doesn't know we want to pause the project, even if your news and what you need to tell your consultant is, listen, I underestimated how much time of mine it was going to take to lead this project, and I just don't have that time available right now. We're going to have to put pause on this and revisit it in the fourth quarter. For example, just that radio silence is terrible. Just be honest about what the barriers are to moving forward and bring your consultant into the conversation so that they can help you. Maybe by discontinuing the persistent emails and calls where they're trying to get word from you about the status of the project.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Jackie. And it is something that I think most leaders struggle with, right? Is that sort of, I think one author called it radical candor, right? But as a business owner, as a consultant, I think we operate under the recognition that some projects may be long-term, some may ebb and flow, and that's how we function. So the more open communication we have with organizations that hire us, the more likelihood we'll be able to step in again in the future and support if we know like this project is dropping off and another one is starting up. So I couldn't agree more that as challenging as it can be to communicate internal to your organization, much less to external consultants, the more open the lines are, I think the more positive the outcome for everyone. And again, it is a courtesy as peers or leaders that we give one another. And it takes work, right? And it's not always possible, but I think it's something absolutely to aspire for.
For sure. Good friends and mentors says clear is kind. So, also if you've made a bad choice in a consultant, I think you and I would both say we'd rather know that it doesn't feel like it's gelling. And, the chances are if it doesn't feel like it's gelling on your end, it doesn't feel like it's gelling on ours either. So let's just be clear and kind and have an honest conversation about the status of the project so that you and I, we both want the best for the project and the client. So we're not going to take that personally. We're going to take that as, okay, let's find the best way to move your project forward. And if that's not with me, that's okay, because I want success for you.
That's so true, Jackie. There's no pride of ownership. It really boils down to, I want the best for the client. And if that means going to someone else in my network or starting from square one and letting the organization find someone else, we would much rather have that, right, than be struggling both in silence and hoping it gets better, because oftentimes it won't. It only gets more challenging. So I think you're right. And again, there may be an opportunity for a course correction, and those conversations are completely appropriate and often necessary as well. And there are some cases where I think Dr. Henry Cloud talks about necessary endings. There may be cases where it just isn't working, and that's totally fine. We're professionals, and that's what happens in the world of consulting. So it's not a surprise, certainly. Jackie, what would you say, you've worked in many industries, food, agriculture, economic development, among others. What trends are you watching in the communications space that other professional communicators listening to this podcast should be monitoring, in your opinion?
Oh, I think a lot about this. And one thing that comes to mind, which may feel obvious, but is authenticity. And I think we've come a long way over the last 5 years or so in being more authentic in our communication. But I'm also talking about authenticity in action. And so I think gone are the days where communicators can be satisfied with just sharing the organization's values, if you will, and putting together the report that says, here's where we stand in terms of our goals. We really have to be aligning the actions of the organization authentically with the values the organization states it cares about, and then communicating about those actions in a really open and transparent way. Unfortunately, I still think we have some organizations that think it's good enough to say, we care about X, and not necessarily go through the operational steps to demonstrate what that looks like in your organization, and having communications be an integral part of that so that they can tell a meaningful story about how you're living out those values to your external audiences.
That's a good insight, Jackie. And I do think you're right that communication is the last mile, if you will, right? If you're professing to do good things, there need to be organizational changes. And then you have to be able to demonstrate what you did internally, externally to make those changes happen so that you have the impact you're aspiring to and talking publicly about or internal to your organization about. So I love that idea of really getting clear as an organization on what are we here to do in the world? How do we do it? And what changes do we need to make to be more as authentic as possible? And then be transparent in sharing the story of how those changes happened. I love that progression. And I would agree with you that more work can be done by all of our organizations in moving in that direction. I think that's a wonderful insight. What's one question that communicators within organizations should be asking, but few people seem to be asking?
I think sometimes we as communicators are satisfied with the role an organization has defined for us. And unfortunately, in my opinion, sometimes that role is rather narrow. It is the last mile, as you said. Literally, organizations believe that their communication function exists to simply turn around and write a press release or share out what the organization has decided to say. And of course, there's so much missed opportunity in that. Back to the last question and conversation, in connecting action to our communication, in allowing communication to even provide advice into the organization about the types of actions that might come across best for the stakeholders. I think we miss as organizations how our communicators are often closely tied with the people and emotions that have the ability to make or break our business. And yet we relegate them to our mouthpiece instead of inviting them to sit at the table where the decisions are made about what the organization's going to do to deliver on its purpose. So I guess I would encourage my fellow communicators to be asking more often, how can I contribute to that? Would you mind if I attend that meeting? And actively try to think of ways that you can contribute to the organization and its actions, and not just be the function that carries out the message others have decided needs to be delivered.
Yeah, I love that, Jackie. And I think, as you said, there's so much opportunity for communicators to serve as that heartbeat, right? Empathy, the emotion, the guidance, the strategy piece. I mean, you sort of touched on all of those things. And obviously, there are many different leaders across organizations that have many of those functions as well. I do think communicators are obviously trained to be part of these conversations, whether that's in a marketing sense or a journalistic sense or even academic kinds of communication. So there are so many chances to be engaged. And I think you're right. It starts by volunteering and asking and trying to be curious about what your organization is doing and the unique contributions that you as a communicator are trained and passionate about providing, and finding opportunities to engage and collaborate productively across your organization before that last mile. I think that's a really powerful point. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jackie, what would you say are things that you do to stay sane while navigating the ups and downs of purpose-driven work?
That's a really good question because it's so true, right? It's so meaningful and cup-filling to be part of work that you feel like really makes a difference. But then the flip of that is, of course, when things don't go your way, it can be, I think, even more devastating than maybe other types of work. So unfortunately, I am fairly decent at compartmentalizing. I think it's my issues and crisis background. I'm kind of uniquely good at knowing what's needed in the moment and being able to kind of push the other stuff away. But I'm getting better about relying on colleagues and friends to kind of serve as a sounding board for me when I'm feeling down, because I'm realizing that's probably not the most healthy way of dealing with those downs, is to kind of push it away. And I'm kind of calling bullshit on my assessment that I don't want to burden other people with my worries and my concerns. That's not a burden to my colleagues. I've had so many people step up and serve as counselors and advisors for me as I've started this independent consulting journey. And I've really realized that it's a gift for me to honor those people with my experiences and share my ups and downs with them so that they feel like they can share their ups and downs with me. and so that they can pour into me and give me advice and recognize that I really value that in my life. So I guess that's a really long way of saying, Nate, I don't have it figured out, but I'm trying to get better at leaning on my trusted advisors to help me through those tough times.
Absolutely, Jack. Yeah, I love that. And believe me, I do not have it at all figured out either. And I think you're right that community is such a gift and something that it's so easy to neglect, getting caught up in the day-to-day. And I'm so happy for you that you found those people, that trusted network that can empathize and also give insights or listen, and that you're able to reciprocate that. I think that's so important as communicators, especially to your point, doing purpose-driven work that can be really, really exciting and have great highs and then deep valleys as well when things don't go as we expected, which is inevitable. So love the fact that you're able to build out that community and really find great value and purpose in those kinds of conversations. You know, one of the things that we do as social impact communicators is use stories to open people's hearts. What's a story that you've encountered? It could be a book or a movie or any platform. Maybe that's changed the way you really think about your life and work.
That's a great question. And I would be remiss if I didn't return to the previous question quickly, Nate, and
Please.
say, very much appreciate that you have been one of those people who have stepped up and offered to serve as an advisor to me. So thank you for that.
It's an honor. Back at you, Jackie.
So a story that has changed a book so I recently just finished The Secret Society of Success by Tim Schur. And I guess I thought that I was pretty good at not defining success by typical societal norms like titles and salary and how big my house is and how fancy my car is. But it turns out we are sort of made that way as humans, and it's real easy for us to default back to measuring our success by other people's definition or society's definition of what success looks like. And it came to me at the very right time in my life, because as I transitioned to an independent consultant, suddenly I found myself really needing to redefine how I thought about success, because even if my title hadn't been the most important thing before, now I didn't necessarily have a title other than now I own this new thing that I created that I hope other people like, you know?
Right.
So I really recommend his book because it really helped me think differently about how I define success, especially now that I'm on my own and I don't have a performance review or organizational goals to tell me whether I'm marching toward a mark that matters to me.
I love that, Jackie. So for those listening and taking notes, The Secret Society of Success is the book by Tim Schur. I will include this in the show notes, but definitely adding it to my reading list, Jackie. And I think you're right. You know, for me, just a quick sidebar, I definitely empathize with your experience and have found that one of the parts of being an entrepreneur that I didn't think about was that sort of you're putting your heart and soul into your work every day. And some days it feels like it's going into the void. And you wonder, like, what is the feedback? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? So I think you're right that resetting our expectations, really thinking about what is meaningful work to us and how do we give people the best experience possible and leave everything on the field and then be confident that it's enough, among other existential questions, perhaps. Those are definitely really, really powerful exercises. And so The Secret Society of Success sounds like a book that could benefit me and a lot of the listeners to this podcast.
Yeah, I really hope so.
Jackie, as we're wrapping up today, it's been wonderful getting to know you better and just hear some of the great insights and wisdom that you've shared. For those who might be looking to work with consultants or hire consultants, or those who frankly are consultants and trying to level up their game, you know, where can people go to find more about you and Relate Strategies?
RelateStrategies.com is my website. And I have a blog on my website. I also talk about lessons learned from my dad on that blog. So it's near and dear to my heart. But I think a lot of those lessons from my childhood are really applicable to us in our day-to-day lives as we interact with colleagues and try to define what leadership looks like for us too, whatever our role is in our organization. So would love to have people follow along on my website, or also I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, and I'm always welcome people reaching out to me via LinkedIn to have conversations or connect.
Awesome. Well, Jacque, thank you so much. Jacque Matsen is owner and founder of Relate Strategies. You can go to relatestrategies.com to learn more and follow Jacque and learn more wisdom from her and her dad. Jacque, it's been a real pleasure, and excited to continue collaboration on this journey we're on together.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much again for asking me. Can't wait for our joint project that I just know is going to come about here soon.
100%, Jacque. All right, take care. And listeners, thank you all for being here. Tune in next time for another episode of Secrets of Social Impact Communicators. Until then, I'm Nate Burt. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye, everybody. Well, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jacque. She is a true practicer of all of the things we talked about today, and would highly recommend collaborating with Jacque at any opportunity you might have. All of the things we mentioned will be in today's show notes. And as always, I want to thank Lee Williams for producing and editing this podcast and doing a fabulous job. Thank all of you for listening. And please tune in again soon for another episode of Secrets of Social Impact Communicators. Until then, I'm Nate Burt. Thanks so much for listening.